All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Swarthmore Borough's Development and Affordability Task Force final report.
Oh, yeah.
We've got meeting minutes, we've got community feedback, and even some expert opinion.
Really digging deep.
Exactly, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And it's all about, well, making Swarthmore a place where more people can actually afford to,
Live. Afford to live.
The big question, right?
Yeah, and what I found really interesting about this report is it doesn't just stay focused on Swarthmore,
Right.
Like, it connects those local challenges to those big national trends.
Oh, absolutely. Like the ones we've all been seeing with housing costs and stuff, right?
Exactly.
It's not just a Swarthmore thing at all.
Not at all.
But, let's start local, okay?
Right.
So what even sparked this whole task force in the first place?
Well, the Borough Council, they were kind of seeing some alarm bells going off,
Yeah.
Housing costs in Swarthmore were going through the roof.
Oh,
And it was starting to price out a lot of people who, really wanted to be part of the community.
yeah, they definitely don't sugarcoat it in this report either.
No.
Like, they just come right out and say it. The median home value in Swarthmore shot up over 40% just between 2000 and 2022.
Whoa.
That's a huge jump, right?
It's huge.
What's behind a spike like that?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, First, you've got Swarthmore's location.
Yeah, so close to Philly.
Exactly. It makes it super desirable.
Right.
But that also means that Swarthmore is caught up in those regional trends, like limited housing supply, and then you have really high demand.
Yeah, everyone wants a piece of that.
Everyone wants to live there. And then the report also points to some historical zoning practices.
Oh, what do you think?
That kind of favored these big single-family homes, which, unintentionally can limit the overall supply of housing.
So even if you are, lucky enough to be earning a decent income,
Right.
those price increases can really make it tough to buy a home.
For sure.
And it's not just buying, right?
No.
The report says over half of Swarthmore renters were already struggling with housing costs back in 2020. And they keep using this term, cost burdened. What does that actually mean?
So cost burden basically means that you're spending a really big chunk of your income. We're talking more than 30% just on housing.
Oh, wow.
And when that happens, it really puts a strain on everything else in your life,
Totally, yeah.
Like groceries, healthcare, saving up for the future. It really limits your options,
Yeah, you're just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
It is.
And it sounds like the task force wants Swarthmore to be part of the solution here,
Oh, yeah.
even though it's a small town.
Exactly.
You're not shying away from this.
No. They're saying that every single community, no matter how big or small,
Yeah.
has a role to play in addressing this, nationwide challenge.
This is everyone's problem.
It is.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Swarthmore specifically, all right? So what does their housing situation even look like right now?
Okay, so if you look at the report's visuals, like figures 1 and 5,
Okay.
it's pretty clear. Single-family homes, they're king.
Yeah.
Like, there are some apartments and stuff, but there's really not a ton of options for people who might want something besides, a standalone house.
And to really understand, the human impact of this, right?
Yeah.
The report shares some personal stories
Oh, yeah.
from Swarthmore residents. And some of them are really heartbreaking, Like there's one about this longtime renter who's basically been priced out of buying a home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then there's another one about a college professor who can't even afford to live in the town where they teach.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's tough.
And it just really highlights the struggles that people are actually facing.
And those stories are powerful examples of what happens when what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAH, it starts to disappear.
NOAH.
Yeah. So these are the older, maybe slightly less updated units that have been renting at more reasonable prices.
Yeah.
But as properties change hands and get renovated, those NOA units often vanish.
They get swept away.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the task force's recommendations, right?
Yeah.
What's their top suggestion for tackling this whole issue?
So their big idea is ADUs, or accessory dwelling units.
ADUs, okay, I've heard of those.
Have you? Okay.
What are those exactly? Break it down for me.
Okay, so think of it as creating a separate little living space, but it's within a property that already exists.
Okay.
Like it could be converting a garage, finishing a basement, or even adding like a small apartment above a detached garage, you know?
So it's like you're adding a mini apartment to your property.
Yeah, basically.
Do those even exist in Swarthmore right now?
They do.
So-
But the report shows in Figure 7, there are only a handful because of the current zoning rules.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and the task force really wants to change that.
Okay.
They see ADUs as this like flexible tool that can create more housing options without like drastically changing the look and feel of Swarthmore, you know?
Right, so you don't want to lose what makes Swarthmore special.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds kind of like a win-win then, right?
Yeah.
The homeowners get, like, the potential rental income. The borough gets more housing units.
Yeah.
And then people who are looking for smaller or more affordable places, they just have more options,
Yeah.
right? What's not to love?
Well, there are always concerns, you know?
Okay.
Some people might worry about the impact on traffic, parking, or the schools, you know, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but the report like really dives into those issues and uses data to show that ADUs are really unlikely to cause those huge disruptions,
Right.
especially if they're rolled out gradually, you know?
It makes sense that, like, a few ADUs here and there
Right.
wouldn't totally overwhelm the system,
Yeah,
right? Compared to, like, a giant new apartment complex or something.
exactly.
Okay, so did the task force actually, like, get into the nitty-gritty of how ADUs would actually work in Swarthmore?
Absolutely. Yeah. They researched a lot of other towns' ADU regulations.
Wow.
And they came up with this detailed proposal for Swarthmore, which is outlined in the report.
So it's not just like this vague idea.
Ugh.
They have, like, concrete plans.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, they propose things like size limits for the ADUs, design standards,
Okay.
you know, to make sure they blend into the neighborhood.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, and even some flexibility on parking requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And they even suggest creating a community resource group
Andrews.
to kind of help people navigate the process of building and permitting an ADU, which can be, you know,
Yeah.
kind of tricky.
It could be a lot.
Yeah,
So it seems like they've really thought this through.
they really have.
But, you know, ADUs are just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right.
The task force also talks about making these bigger changes to zoning, like
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Okay, so that's like their second big idea, and it's a much more long-term one.
Okay.
They're calling for a major update to Swarthmore's like comprehensive plan and a complete overhaul of the zoning code.
Whoa.
Yeah, and the goal is to make affordability like a central focus of how Swarthmore grows and develops in the future.
So it's about, like, shifting the mindset almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
From, like, how do we keep things the same to how do we create a Swarthmore that's, like, welcoming and accessible to everyone.
Exactly. And they want to move away from what's called like exclusionary zoning, which are rules that unintentionally limit housing options,
Nice.
and move towards inclusionary zoning,
Okay.
which are policies that actively encourage a diverse range of housing choices.
Oh, I love that. Inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept.
It sounds like a really powerful way to, like, address these root causes of affordability challenges, you know.
Absolutely.
But before we get too far into that, let's take a quick pause.
All right.
And then when we come back, we'll explore what inclusionary zoning could actually look like in Swarthmore
Sounds good.
and how it could open up even more possibilities beyond just ADUs. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. So we're back and ready to dig into inclusionary zoning.
All right.
What does that actually look like, you know, in practice? Like, are we talking about building high rises in downtown Swarthmore?
No, not quite.
Okay.
It's more about like finding those creative ways to add housing without drastically changing the character of the town, you know?
Right.
The report calls it gentle density.
Gentle density. I like that.
Yeah.
So give me some examples. Like, what kind of housing options are we talking about here?
Okay, so for starters, think about those beautiful old homes in Swarthmore.
Yeah,
Many of them are huge,
they really are.
like with way more space than a single family actually needs.
Right.
So the report suggests looking into like duplex conversions, especially since Swarthmore College is really interested in creating more housing options for their faculty, you know?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and Appendix K even has like some draft zoning language to make that whole process easier.
Oh, wow. So they're really getting into the weeds here.
Yeah.
So instead of one family in, like a giant house,
Right.
you could have two families, each with a bit more manageable space.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What else is on the table?
Well, the report also explores this idea of like dividing some of those extra large homes into triplexes or fourplexes.
Triplexes and fourplexes.
Yeah. And it points out that Swarthmore has almost 30 homes over 5,000 square feet.
Whoa, that's a lot of square footage.
It is.
So dividing those up could create like some really great options for families who need more space, but maybe can't swing a standalone house in Swarthmore, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Are there any other like gentle density options that they're talking about?
Absolutely. They talk about encouraging more townhouses, like the existing Swarthmore Village Green, which is shown in Figure 9.
Okay.
And they even suggest revisiting the regulations around like co-housing.
Co-housing, interesting.
Yeah, which could be a really great option for like seniors who want to live independently, but also have some like built-in community support.
Yeah, especially with all the work that the Aging in Place Task Force has been doing, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm seeing how this whole like gentle density approach could really open up those possibilities without fundamentally changing the fabric of Swarthmore.
Yeah.
But how does inclusionary zoning actually ensure that these new housing options actually benefit people who, need affordable housing?
Okay, that's where the incentives come in.
Incentives. Okay.
Yeah. Inclusionary zoning uses things like density bonuses to encourage developers to include units specifically for lower and middle income households.
Density bonuses. Okay, break that down for me. What is that?
So imagine it as like a little incentive for developers.
Okay.
It's like saying, hey, if you include some affordable units in your project, we'll let you build a bit taller or add more units overall.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
The developer gets to build more, but in exchange, they have to make some of those units affordable.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the report actually gives examples from Lower Merion.
Oh, cool.
Where developers can get an extra story added to their building.
Whoa.
If they include a certain percentage of income qualified units.
So I'm starting to see how this could work, right?
Yeah.
It incentivizes affordability while still like allowing those developers to make a profit, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Are there any other like tools in the inclusionary zoning toolkit?
Yes. The report suggests that Swarthmore consider something called in lieu of fees.
Okay.
So instead of building those affordable units themselves, the developers could actually pay a fee into a fund that supports other affordable housing projects in the borough.
Interesting.
Yeah, and appendices M and N have more details on how that all works.
Oh, perfect. We'll definitely link to those in the show notes.
Yeah.
It sounds like these strategies could really make a difference in creating a more like economically diverse Swarthmore.
I think so.
But, we've been talking a lot about like new development, all this stuff. Did the task force actually consider the people who already live in Swarthmore?
Yes.
And might have concerns about all these changes?
They did. They held a bunch of community outreach events, which are detailed in Appendix B.
Oh, cool.
And they also gathered tons of feedback through surveys and open forums.
Wow, so they really did their due diligence.
They did.
Okay, so what were people saying? Were they like on board with all these ideas?
It was kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is to be expected, Some people were really excited about creating those more affordable options and saw it as a way to make Swarthmore more inclusive.
Right.
Others were worried about the potential downsides, like increased traffic, strain on parking, or maybe even changing like the character of the town.
Makes sense that people would have like questions and concerns.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something as like personal as their neighborhood, right?
Exactly.
Were there any like common themes in the feedback that they got?
Yeah, a big one was definitely finding the right balance between like adding more housing and then preserving open space and all the things that people already love about Swarthmore.
Right.
There were also a lot of comments about the need for like diverse housing options, not just apartments,
Right.
but also townhouses, smaller homes, and things like co-housing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
People were also concerned about making sure, that landlords are held accountable and maintain their properties responsibly.
Yeah, all good points.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's this like real desire to create more affordable housing, but also this like healthy dose of caution about potential, unintended consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
Did the task force address these concerns at all?
They did, yeah. They acknowledged that, not every solution is perfect.
Right.
And that there will inevitably be trade-offs and compromises.
Yeah.
But they also emphasized that, like, doing nothing isn't an option either, Swarthmore's housing challenges, they're not going to magically disappear on their own.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that community change is rarely simple or easy.
Yeah,
You know, there are always going to be those different perspectives and priorities to consider.
for sure.
So did the task force offer any suggestions for addressing those like immediate affordability challenges that people are facing right now, even as they work on these, bigger long-term solutions?
Yes, they had a couple of supplemental recommendations
Oh.
that could be implemented more quickly.
Okay.
One that stood out was creating a relocation assistance program
Oh, interesting.
for renters who are displaced by new development.
That's really important.
It
We can't forget about the people who are struggling to, stay in Swarthmore today, even as we work to make it more affordable for others in the future.
absolutely.
So are there anything else in this like immediate needs category?
There was one more really interesting idea,
Okay.
though, it would be a much longer term project.
Okay.
The task force suggested that Swarthmore Borough could actually purchase the SEPTA station parking lot
The SEPTA station parking lot.
and develop it into mixed income housing.
Whoa, that's a bold idea.
It is.
Are they serious?
They are, and they even included a visual of the concept in Figure 10.
Wow.
It's a big undertaking, for sure,
Yeah.
but the potential is huge.
I could see that.
Imagine mixed income housing right next to the train station.
Right there.
Easy access to public transportation and town center. They would maintain commuter parking at ground level.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it could be a real game changer for accessibility.
Ah,
It could
okay.
really transform that whole area.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have,
The affordability problem,
yeah.
the potential of ADUs, the whole idea of gentle density, the ins and outs of inclusionary zoning,
Yep.
community feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and even some like pretty out-of-the-box ideas.
Yeah, they were thinking big.
They really were. So what does all this mean for the future of Swarthmore?
Well, the report itself is really optimistic.
Okay, good.
They believe that these recommendations, especially legalizing ADUs and updating that zoning code, could make Swarthmore a more inclusive, vibrant, and economically diverse community.
I'm feeling that optimism too.
Yeah.
It sounds like they've put a lot of thought and effort into like crafting a plan that addresses both the immediate needs and that long-term vision for Swarthmore.
They really have.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one big takeaway you want our listener to ponder?
Well, what strikes me is how this report goes beyond just numbers and policies,
Right.
It really gets at, like, the heart of what it means to be a community.
It shows how those seemingly small choices,
Yeah.
like zoning regulations, can have this ripple effect across generations
Absolutely.
and contribute to those larger issues like economic and racial inequality.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the importance of, having these conversations, engaging with our local governments, and being like active participants in shaping the future of our communities.
For sure.
So, dear listener, as we leave you with all this information swirling around in your head,
Yeah.
we have one final question for you.
All right, hit me.
If you were a member of the Swarthmore Borough Council,
Okay.
what actions would you prioritize to make Swarthmore a more affordable and welcoming place for everyone?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
And this report makes it clear
Mm-hmm.
there's no easy answer,
No.
There will be compromises, tough choices,
Yeah.
and probably some pushback,
Right.
no matter what path they choose,
It's a good reminder that change is never a straight line.
especially when it comes to something as important as, housing and community development.
Absolutely.
But it feels like the task force has done some really impressive work here.
I agree.
They've laid out the possibilities, presented the data,
Mm-hmm.
brought those diverse community voices into the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
This report isn't just a bunch of, facts and figures.
Yeah.
It's a call to action.
It is. And it's an invitation for you, the listener,
Yes.
to get involved,
Exactly.
Don't just take our word for it. Go explore the full report. Dive into those appendices. See what resonates with you.
Yes.
Connect with your local officials.
Mm-hmm.
The future of Swarthmore depends on engaged residents like you.
Couldn't agree more. And, this deep dive is just a starting point.
Yeah.
There's so much more to unpack, and we encourage you to do just that. And don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll have links to the full report and all those supporting documents in the show notes.
And don't let the conversation end there. Talk to your neighbors, attend those borough council meetings, share your own thoughts and ideas,
Yes.
creating a thriving and inclusive Swarthmore.
Yes.
It's a collaborative effort.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Swarthmore's Affordability Challenge.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time
See ya.
for another fascinating exploration.